Revenue operations is much more than words in a job title. It's a methodology that is transforming sales, marketing, and customer success teams into high-performing revenue drivers. However, many revenue leaders still have critical questions about how to operationalize it. Furthermore, they want to know what others in the industry are doing. That's why we conducted original research and put together our findings in the 2021 Revenue Operations and Customer Acquisition Benchmark Report. In partnership with RevOps Squared, we asked hundreds of cross-departmental revenue leaders across top companies to reveal their approach to revenue planning, analytics and revenue operations, and customer acquisition. We've identified exactly how teams are aligning to hit their revenue targets, as well as the new activity, pipeline, and customer acquisition benchmarks to strive for in 2021 and beyond. Download the entire report for free at ringDNA.com/RevOpsReport.
What if your sales team could know the moment a buyer arrives on your website and talk with them instantly? With Qualified's conversational sales and marketing platform purpose-built for Salesforce, that's all possible. It's not rocket science, it's common sense. Conversations move deals forward. Live chat, voice calls, and meeting bookers accelerate sales conversations without a single email exchange. Capture prospects in that magic moment when they're most interested in learning about your business. Head on over to qualified.com to chat with their team and learn more.
The last year and a half have given a new perspective to it, but the flexibility and the freedom of what is the hottest topic right now is remote work and hybrid work and return to work and all of it. I haven't thought about it once because this is what we do every day, right? I haven't gone to an office in years. And even when I did go in office, I largely made my own schedule, as we all do in the profession.
Hi, friends. Welcome to the Sales Enablement Podcast. I'm your host, Andy Paul. That was John Tecce. John is a senior account executive at Alation. And he's joined me today for a really fun conversation about sales. John did a cold outreach to me about being a guest on the show. And he doesn't have a book or a large following. He wasn't trying to promote anything. He just wanted to talk about sales, which I like. And he was so thoughtful in his message to me that immediately stood out from among the hundreds of cold outreaches and pitches that I receive every year. So here's what you're going to like about John. For someone who's been in sales a relatively short time, 10 years, as opposed to the hundreds of years in which I've been selling, he is very thoughtful about sales, about selling. As you'll hear in our conversation, he's paying close attention to his sales environment and even closer attention to the things that he does and can do that have the right impact on his buyers. Also, sales is a family affair with John. His father, Michael, has spent his career of 30-plus years in sales and sales leadership. And so they're both going to join me on an upcoming episode of the show, our first parent-offspring interview coming up this fall. I'm really looking forward to that. So before we get to John, I want to remind you to subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen to it. And if you subscribe, we'd certainly appreciate it if you could also give us your feedback about how we're doing in the form of a review. So thank you. All right, let's jump into it. John, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Andy. Appreciate it.
Well, pleasure to have you here. So, a little bit of a backstory is you cold called me, basically, to be on the show, which, a lot of people do. We get well over 1,000 inbound, unsolicited pitches for people to be guests on the show, but not many break through. So you did. So tell me about that. What was the inspiration to reach out?
It all started with how I discovered your podcast a couple of months ago. It was Derek Wazinski's Year Zero episode in particular. Mm-hmm. And after listening to that, first of all, big fan of his stuff, but then listening to some of the other episodes, it was really hearing the podcast fill a gap in the space, I think, in talking about the profession and the trade almost in a real way. And so I think it sparked me to reach out. Just one, I was inspired by it, but two, you mentioned a couple of times that looking for new voices in the space, and I'm certainly not self-proclaiming myself as one, but coming up on a decade in tech sales and starting to evaluate my career so far. But really just wanted to chat with you about, experience on the newer side as a millennial in the profession and More recently, there's a Wall Street Journal article published last week at the time of recording about, the profession as it goes forward. So
we'll
that
talk
was another
about
thing.
that. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you did reach out, and not just because you were saying nice things about me. First of all, I love Derek. Derek is, I wish I could have him on the show more frequently. Always a pleasure, and he's got such a great perspective on work and life that I wish more people had in this profession. So, Derek Wazinski, for people that want somebody else to follow, definitely worth following. So, so tell us, how did you get into sales?
Unlike most people who say, "Hey, I ended up in it accidentally," or "I never thought I'd be in sales." A lot of lineage in the profession, through my family. In particular, my father's been in sales leadership for over, my gosh, I think he's coming up on 37 years.
And so what's he done?
So he's been started his career at a company called Lanier that was then acquired by Ricoh. So in that space, copiers, and now today all kinds of different IT services.
Well, did you start at Ricoh?
I did. So out of school, I was at that. I went to Penn State in their business school and was at kind of a crossroads leaving school as to, I don't want to call it the dream job, right? But the stereotypical dream job of something in the sports marketing space. With very little stability and a lot of probable travel and moving around versus tech sales, which offers you some of that, but quite frankly, a lot more money to be made. So I ended up going with that choice. Ricoh is a great company and was great to me, both through that process and the years I was there.
Okay, but now before you jump into your sales career, so tell me about dance marathoning.
Yes. So Penn State Dance Marathon is the largest student-run philanthropy in the world. It benefits a charity called Four Diamonds, which supports Pennsylvania families that have children that are fighting cancer. Something I'm really, really passionate about, and was very active in the fundraising around, while I was at Penn State. And you could definitely say that contributed to some of, not only my love for sales, but certainly driving towards something you're passionate about, number one, and number two, tying a financial element to that too.
Right. Well, so tell us about the dance marathon though, because now you're too young maybe to have seen this movie, though maybe you did. A movie called They Shoot Horses, Don't They? Which was, did you ever see that? Mm-mm. Oh, no. See, you're involved in, it's a movie about dance marathons. Let's see. I think it was Robert Redford and Jane Fonda, maybe. It's been years since I've seen it, but it was about back in the day in I think the 20s or 30s, where this was a thing, in the United States. It was like a competitive endeavor. Couples would do these dance marathons. I think it was like, professional, maybe even, if I remember correctly. But
I never knew that, and I was in one. That's crazy.
Well, see, I thought for sure you know that. So yeah, you need to go check that movie out.
Yes.
I don't know, did you Google it yet while we were talking? I just
typed it down because I'm definitely going to now.
Yeah. So, first thing that came up, let's see, who was Jane Fonda, Michael Sarrazin, not Robert Redford. A bunch of other old actors that no one would recognize these days. But you have to check it out since you're into that. So what'd you guys do? Just so explain the dance marathoning and how that would work.
So I mentioned the philanthropy side of it, but that all culminates in an annual event that happens on Penn State's campus that is the dance marathon. So if you are selected to dance, which is a very selective process through different organizations on campus. I was in part of an independent organization, but very big with fraternities, sororities, other types of things. And you stay on your feet and you dance for 46 straight hours all weekend. You're in the Bryce Jordan Center, which is their basketball arena on campus, and that's kind of the event that culminates it. Yes.
So basically, when you solicit funds, then for the sport, the charity, you get paid based on how many hours you stay upright.
Some organizations do it that way. Other organizations just say, hey, the more that we raise in advance of this, the more dancers we get to participate. And so that it's kind of a combination of the two. And really during the weekend as well is when, obviously it's streamed online and donations are solicited that way too. And then of course it culminates at the end with all the dancers finally sit, a little delirious and
I can imagine, yes. Yeah.
And then the total is released. So last year's total was just over $10 million. And I think they're well over, I think 170 million total all time, which is
very cool. Very, very cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, if this had been the 20s and 30s, you could have done that as a career before you got back to sales. But now I'm sure there's other crazy things we could do like that. So, all right. So you've been in sales about 10 years, right?
Yes.
So what's the biggest lesson you've learned about yourself?
I've learned I'm much more of an introvert than I thought I was. And I'm not as much of a, I don't align well with the stereotypical personality of a salesperson. I don't think. Maybe customers of mine or my wife might tell you differently, but that's probably the biggest lesson I've learned, which I think aligns with a lot of what you talk about on the podcast in terms of there's no, archetype of a salesperson.
No. I mean, I would never, I knew I was sort of socially shy when I got into sales. But yeah, I was more conscious of being introvert when I got in because I was surrounded by people who weren't. Yes. When I came into sales, there's much more an emphasis on sort of the being gregarious, as sort of a basic qualification. And yeah, I would meet all these people. It's like, oh my God, they can talk to other people so easily, right? And it was like, yeah, that wasn't easy for me.
I think it's also like, you think about the other definition of introversion, extroversion. It's said that extroverts get their energy from being with other people and introverts recoup their energy when they're not with other people. And I've kind of learned I'm very much the latter, which has certainly been very interesting the last year and a half, not being with a lot of people. I went through, some tough moments like everybody, but I feel like I really adjusted a lot better than a lot of folks. And that's really when I kind of learned about myself. Wait a minute, it's because I'm not missing that people element of it as much. I love connecting with people one-on-one like we're doing now, but those larger settings, it's just not, I'm not as aligned to it.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, I felt somewhat the same way, though I'd been working independently for 2 decades. So, but early on when I started my own company, it was just me. And I was like, yeah, I'm fine. I mean, I enjoyed being with people. I thrived on meeting customers throughout my entire career, interacting with people. But yeah, I've always been self-sufficient when it comes to that. All right. So the biggest lesson you've learned about sales, maybe that's different than you thought it would be.
It's so much more about solving problems, consulting, solving business cases than coercion, persuasion, all of the typical, stereotypical things about sales. I think back to my time at Penn State, tremendous university, great business school.
Right.
But I remember thinking, I was a marketing major, right? Because few schools have sales majors. And Penn State's business school does such a great job with case competitions and different business. And I never thought that was for me, right? I always thought, that's, it's for people who want to go into consulting or maybe finance. I just did. I've had imposter syndrome when it came to that. And after 10 years now in sales, I'm like, wait a minute, that's what I do every day. Like that's what this profession is. And if I could tell myself, back at age 2019, hey, dude, you should participate in that stuff. That's going to be your career. That's probably the biggest takeaway I have.
Well, but let me ask a question about that because, I'm great. You have that perspective, but do you think that perspective is widely shared? Because I don't get a sense that it is, right?
It definitely isn't. I think, and you've talked about it on plenty of episodes with what we consume via, mass media. Of course, there's all the classic sales movies. But even recently, like you think about The Office, right? Like Todd Packer is the, the outside sales rep, right? And he's kind of the idiot that's comes in, he's loud and brash and whatever.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think, exactly. And even, Dwight in The Office, right? He's also a very successful sales rep, but, he's a weird guy and he's not really a people person. And so I think it's an interesting, a lot of my experience, I don't think it's widely held. I think a lot of people associate that with, the Todd Packers and the Jordan Belforts of the world,
Right.
and not with what we actually do every day, at least in enterprise B2B sales.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think that's still, yes, provides lots of room for growth in the profession. is maybe the kind way of saying it. All right. So just two more questions, and we'll hop into this, talk about this Wall Street Journal article. So what have you found that you enjoy the most?
It's interesting. The last year and a half have given a new perspective to it, but the flexibility and the freedom of, what is the hottest topic right now is remote work and hybrid work and return to work and all of that. I haven't thought about it once because this is what we do every day, right? I haven't gone to an office in years. And even when I did go in office, I largely made my own schedule, as we all do in the profession. And so, it sticks out to me in a new way. Now I became a father a year ago. This coming week. Thank you. But being
so your birthday this week coming up. Yeah.
Big birthday coming up.
Big birthday.
Yes. So it is chaos in our house with a 1-year-old and a dog running around. And there's days I pull my hair out, but I'm also very grateful that, what I've kind of come to enjoy is that flexibility and freedom in a new way now, being there for to see every, moment with my son growing up. And, I know you talk a lot about with your kids growing up, kind of easing back on the pedal a little bit. And this profession affords you the ability to do that because we are measured by output and very tangible things.
Yeah. Okay. So last sort of general question, rapid fire questions here. What do you enjoy the least? Or what's least enjoyable?
The pace of any given enterprise engagement is, as anybody that works in the enterprise SaaS or enterprise software space, it's just can be a drag because it's something that you think about all day, every day. What am I missing? What else could I be doing? It's a constant self-analysis and deal analysis all the time. And I think, that can drive you crazy. You talk a lot about mental health in sales, and I'm glad you're bringing light to it with the podcast. I think that's the part I enjoy the least is the answer a lot more than I would think is there's nothing to do right now. Like it's just has to happen naturally, but we're not wired like that. We're not in this profession to think like that. So that's the thing I enjoy the least.
Yeah. Sales abhors a vacuum. And unfortunately, that's sort of oftentimes a trouble point because they rush to fill it with crap. All right. Well, let's move on. You talked about this Wall Street Journal article that came out last week about, hey, we got all these high-paying jobs and not enough people to fill them. And, of course, the highlight of the article was featured our founder, ringDNA founder, Howard Brown, and Amber Hoos, one of our AEs. But I thought it was sort of interesting, reading the article, because I'm interested in your take on it, because, and we'll get into some of the details, because it's like, some people they quoted, it makes me wonder, these people even familiar with sales these days? But I thought the thing that's sort of funny is you start as, demand, they talk about the article, talks demand for sales roles has shot up, but recruiters say they struggle to convince people to make sales a career. And this is sort of the irony, as I point out oftentimes, is there was this sort of iconic report put up by Forrester, I think in 2015, saying B2B sales is going away, basically, right? They're going to lose 20 to 25% of jobs by 2020. Now, during that same period, even before the pandemic, sales employment skyrocketed as more and more SaaS companies took off and bring in more inside sellers and so on. Interesting. Are you involved in hiring and recruiting at Alation?
I am not in my present role beyond, we do have a great referral program, so I do try to take advantage of it. We're certainly growing very rapidly, but not directly. I was in a leadership role in a prior role at Rico. It was the only time I was recruiting and hiring in about 2013, 2014.
Okay. Well, what's your sense at Alation? Are they having a hard time finding candidates that they want for the roles?
It doesn't. I don't think I think it's right now a little bit the opposite problem, which is a good thing to have as a rapidly growing startup. We have a lot of demand for the roles. I think the challenge in the space is figuring out there's in this article it talks about, right, there's some folks that are trying to either figure out if sales is for them, or it's earlier in career and they're not sure about the entire concept of sales.
Right.
You also have a crop of folks who are have been in sales for a while, but at the same time, it's you start to get rooted in different industries or networks or what have you. So it's kind of finding that blend of someone who can balance both. But I think when it comes to attracting people to the profession, it's a tough thing to figure out when you're especially when you're rapidly growing, right? I think it's
Right.
about, all right, how do we balance development with, hey, we got to make the quarter, right?
Yeah, which is not a balance that's struck very, very well for the most part, right? And I think we have sort of two, well, it's more than two factors, but one is we are at an age where it's easy to focus on sort of metrics to the exclusion of developing people, which is sort of the default mode for a lot of management types. But also, we still, we haven't made sales seem attractive to 50% of the population, which is women, because we still deal in these outdated stereotypes about hunters and extroverts and macho sales management that doesn't make it seem very attractive to women wanting to come into and understandably so.
I might want to change my earlier answer to my least favorite thing in sales, because everything you just summarized is it.
Yeah,
Is
okay. All right.
that challenge, that outward, and we still do it, right? In job descriptions, you read it all the time, as
Sure.
do I. And you're whether consciously or subconsciously, you're turning people off for the role based on things you think you want, right? But what you find is exactly what you said. You're excluding folks who don't see themselves fitting in that sort of macho, aggressive hunter.
Which aren't even relevant, right? I mean, do you? I never once. I was at sold lots and lots of stuff, hundreds of millions of dollars. It's just like I never considered myself a hunter. I mean, I was a problem solver, and I've talked about this on the show, but I think we need to retire the word hunter. Because if anybody knows the way that hunting takes place in real life these days, I mean, deer hunting. I'm drafting an article about deer hunting. I come from Wisconsin, big deer hunting place, and the way deer hunting takes place is people go and find their location they're going to hunt. They build a stand that they sit in, so they're stationary. But before that, they may go out and put various lures and attractants like doe urine and so on trees, or maybe food to attract the deer to them. So what does that sound like? Does that sound like hunting, or does that sound like inbound marketing?
Yeah, exactly. That summarizes it perfectly. And I think we make it sound like sales is you're in Game of Thrones out there with a sword charging at people.
Right.
Like, it's just not what it is.
No. I mean, yes, it's competitive and so on. It's part of the competition. It's part of what we love, right? But
I think even competition, sometimes you think about the classic 3 T's, right? Timing, talent, and territory. You can only control one of those things. So one of the things that's eaten me up, over my decade so far is I am very competitive, but it took me a long time to realize that I can't control the other 2 things. And if there are peers of mine that are better stacked in those areas that are beating me, it's not necessarily an indication. It took a long time to realize that. So I think even, making it about competition, sometimes you get some people that are turned off by competing in something you don't have a lot of control in.
yeah. Well, I mean, you don't control the product. You don't control the price. But I think that if you are competitive, at least for me, one of the fun things, the most challenging parts, that was, creative, demand creativity, and I always have thought about sales as first and foremost of a creative pursuit, is, how do I get the competition to react to me? And that's always my goal, right? How do I get the competition to react to me as opposed to me being reactive to them? And as an individual seller, there's lots of things I think you can do. Yeah, you can influence product, can influence price, but you can influence how you are perceived by the buyer, the way you interact with them, the connections you build with them, the credibility you build, the trust you build, the perspectives you bring on the things that they're trying to achieve. I said, it's creative.
Creative competition. I think that's a good blend of it, and also competing with yourself, ignoring the scoreboard in the sense of how you're doing, whatever. Competing with, hey, can I get a little better than I got yesterday? Can I do a little bit more than I did yesterday? And a lot of that is driven by self-development that needs to happen. I mean, it's a whole separate topic around training versus self-development, but I think that's a big part of competition too.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great point to bring up. I think that, yeah, every day in sales, you first and foremost compete against yourself. You compete against this idea that, should I make that extra call? Should I, go the extra mile? I mean, we're human nature, right? It's not just a matter of discipline or willpower. It's just, yeah, we're competing against certain instincts we have, and we just, yeah, we have to win more often than not, right?
That's it. And selling yourself sometimes on doing it.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think if anybody's gone through sales and hasn't gone through a period where it's felt harder than it needs to be, then yeah, they haven't been honest with themselves. Because I remember in my first year, yeah, I was never a big fan of cold calling. I mean, that was my job. We had physical cold calling in person. Driving out to a business park and parking the car and walking from door to door to door to door and doing that for quite a while. Yeah, and there were days it was just like, yeah, I'll kick off at lunchtime today because it's just too much for me.
I started my career the exact same way, and I think it's. I look back now. You talk a lot about the return of the full cycle rep, and I think that while I don't anticipate wanting to go back to a business park right now in a suit and do that again per se, immediately, given that we're still working through this pandemic, but I think. That full cycle was so important and is so important for all of those elements of it. And I think that's where, if you learn to get good at that part of it, you can drag a lot of that through the rest of the sales cycle versus, I think a little bit of the division of labor around sourcing your own opportunities and territory has also caused some challenges for sure.
Well, you create two friction points because two people need to make connections with the buyer. And it's not that it's being done successfully, but it is an extra friction point. We shouldn't kid ourselves. And at some point, yeah, I think it's come back, and I think this could be a competitive issue because I do have a rule of thumb, which is that your odds of winning the business are in inverse proportion to the number of times you force the buyer to tell you their story.
Huh.
Think about that.
I have not thought about it in that way, but I about 2 hours ago got off of a call where it was really a lot of forcing the buyer to feel like they were telling their story for the 10th time. But exactly to your point, it was because, hey, we really want to make sure we got this right. And by the way, that story started a year and a half ago, so that story changes 50 times.
Oh, it does. Yeah, and it's not about the point of the customer changing. It's about, well, I'm going to bring in my manager, then we're going to bring in the director, then we're going to bring in the VP of sales, and every time a new face is brought into the account, well, tell us what you're interested in. It's like, right? It's like, don't you have Salesforce? Don't you use it? I mean, that's why we put all that information in there. Or we'll do a pre-call briefing or, something, but it's, it's crazy. Crazy. So another thing that was talked about in that article is talking about, and I don't know if this was a quote from somebody, I think maybe it's just an article itself saying that, businesses are trying to demonstrate that they don't operate in a pressure cooker environment anymore or work the phones the way the sales workers once did. And I'm like, yeah, okay. Just exactly who did you talk to?
I'll definitely call BS on that one, and that is nothing to say of the culture here at Alation or otherwise. I don't think it's it certainly doesn't feel like a pressure cooker in a negative way, but I don't think that accurately characterizes at least the demand gen portion of the profession.
Yeah, I think any part of it. I mean, the Uncrushed just released a survey of sellers on mental health. 75% feel stressed or extremely stressed. And I've referred to this several times on the show, but is that really necessary? I mean, I don't think it's necessary. I mean, I've been in environments where it hasn't been that way. But certainly more often than not, that's the way it is.
It is. And I've, what has contributed to reduction of that for me as it pertains to some
Right.
of that, and I've seen some other folks, or I've learned rather from other folks, and that's why I do it, is, if you build a territory and build a network and sustain that network, that element of stress starts to go away a little bit, because you have people that you can reach out to and start to kind of establish that reputation over time. And you're not sitting there stressing about, why do I not have enough pipeline? You might not have enough pipeline because maybe there's not, the product market fit's not there yet, or maybe just you're a little early to the market, or what have you, but it's not going to be because you can't get conversations. Stressing about getting conversations is a different thing entirely.
Yeah. So let's explore that a little bit. So when you say network, define really what you mean. I mean, is this like the old-fashioned days? I have a Rolodex of people, or how are you defining your network?
When you talk about relationship, right, I kind of view it the same way, where it's not a friendship. It's not I'm not a big, golf dinner type of person when it comes to these things. It's much more about a, oh my gosh, there's a word and I'm blanking on it. I think it's in Mandarin, that means a mutually beneficial exchange of relationships. I forget the word, but it's that. So basically looking at it like, hey, if I can help you out, maybe I met you in a previous sales cycle, or you were a customer of the company I worked for before, and we got to know each other from whatever. It's a large network of loose ties that, is mutually beneficial when it needs to be, but it's not forced when it doesn't. And I think that's a big part of, doing right by people, making sure you're relevant to people, but also having the self-awareness to know when you're not, and not trying to, hey, will you take a look at our product just because I like you, right? Like, if it's not a fit, it's not a fit.
Right. But yeah, I think the thing that you bring up that's really important that many people miss is you're self-aware of the fact that there is this network that you're building, that you are building these connections, that you're going to maintain these connections, that they have, even though they're a network of loose connections, as you said, in aggregate, it has value. And it's something that's just going to grow in value as you move throughout your career. And Keith Ferrazzi talks about this extremely articulately in his book, Never Eat Lunch Alone. Is not, I don't think enough people focus on this idea that one of the assets that they're building is this network. And may not be in the past, people say, well, we'll hire this salesperson on the strength of their Rolodex, right? And that was always an illusion. That was a myth, because it didn't translate that well. But this idea of a network does, I believe.
I agree. And I think it's where I've seen it impact. We talked about the stress aspect, right? I mean, when I joined Alation about just coming up on a year ago, it was through warm relationships that I had here. But when I came into this, similar territory that I'd been in, there's no stress. I kind of already know here's who I probably should be engaging with. More importantly, here's maybe who won't benefit from us right now, but whatever. And still further, hey, you may even be in a different role. It's irrelevant to what I do now, but I still want to at least try to help you with whatever you're working on, if it's appropriate.
Exactly. Yeah. The offer to be able to help. It's bilateral. So at all times. Yeah. So before you joined Alation, the company you're at, it wasn't the exact same product, right? You weren't serving the same customers?
Similar. It was in the BI space, a company called ThoughtSpot, great startup in that space. I think they're in their Series E now. Similar space in the kind of the data office, and going into those sort of business unit data and analytics folks.
Right.
So a lot of the same network in terms of that, but a little different in the sense of the challenges that are tackled, right? And I think moving into now data governance and things like that, it's a different audience, but close enough, right? A lot of the people I was working with, either they had responsibility for that now, or they know the person that does, and that's a pretty easy introduction if you build enough of a reputation that you're not going to waste their time and not bug them if it's not real.
Right. Well, let me ask you a question. So, in terms of aligned to this idea of building a network, is, so from your perspective, your vision of what your future holds is, so do you see yourself staying in an individual contributor role where the value of this network continues to grow, and you're able to have perhaps less stressful environment, not worried about hitting anything but your own number, and great career doing that? Or where do you see yourself going?
It's a great question. I dipped my toe into leadership way too early. Our team did well, and it was a good opportunity, but relative to my enjoyment of it, way too early. I think eventually, I could, in the way of a lot of what I learned about networking came from a shout out to Phil Tanaccio, who is a vice president at ThoughtSpot, but previously at Click and some other tech companies here in the Philly area. He transitioned from an individual contributor role to a leadership role, and was so giving around these lessons and his own network even. And I could absolutely see myself at some point, kind of making a similar transition to doing that. I look at somebody who's made that transition like him. I also look at somebody like my father, who's been in leadership for most of his 37 years, but loves it, absolutely loves it, loves giving back to people, and developing people. And I've inherited some of that too. I'm going to scratch that itch at some point, I think.
Yeah, and I think that really sort of becomes at least in my mind, that is sort of the decision criteria, right? I think if you have that passion for developing people, management may be the route to go. But if you don't have that, and you think it's just a route to more money, or think it's a route to power or whatever, bad motivation, because we see that in spades today with sales leaders, sales managers, I call them sales bosses, that have the wrong motivations and don't understand they're going to only succeed if their people, not just their people hit their numbers, if their people succeed as human beings. So yeah, and I think you can make that transition at various points. And I know in my career, I've known lots of peers who have gone in and out, right? Have said, I wanted the management role, and then stepped back and said, no, I'd much prefer to have more control over my existence as an individual contributor, make more money, which you almost always do, unless it's a stock play, as an individual contributor. And I knew lots of people just, had been in management, backed away, said, nope, just want to control my own patch. And I think it's great.
And isn't it interesting, a lot of the characteristics you talk about that are, things that drive you towards sales management, they don't really sound like you're aggressive hunter, the words that you throw out there for individual contributors. It's almost like it's a completely different thing that, you talk about attracting people into sales, from an individual contributor standpoint, but also, at a management level, like it has nothing to do with a lot of those adjectives.
No, and that's, this has been written about for decades. Why do we continue to take our top producers and make them managers? Which is still, an ongoing mystery why we do that. Because, they oftentimes don't have the characteristics you want for a manager. And it's nice, okay, how are we going to reward them? Well, there's other ways to reward people. Maybe a bigger patch, maybe a small team they work as part of. I mean, there's other things you can give people other than managing people.
I've also found too, this AE SDR relationship can be developmental. I have had a lot of fun with. I have an SDR who graduated from college 2 months ago. Literally, he just started in the professional world.
Right.
And I'm having a blast. I mean, it's been great that you can also find different ways as an individual contributor to scratch that itch, but maybe you're not ready to go full bore into management. But right now I'm really enjoying the conversations I have with him and seeing the development and all of that. But at the end of the day, I'm not fiscally responsible for his number in the way that you would be. So it's a nice balance that I got right now.
Yeah. Well, it's like having grandchildren. You can influence them, but you can hand them back to their parents.
That's a great comparison.
Yeah, I think there's something to that. But I also think that this then becomes sort of a measure that companies should be looking at is, before you promote someone, are they managing peers, right? Are they helping peers? Is this something that you're getting feedback on? Are you witnessing it? Are you seeing it? Do they set aside time to do it instead of, purely out of self-interest? They're helping helping their peers or people that are new on the job. And for me, that's always been the criteria I look for. And doesn't mean that you're necessarily promoting the best performer. And
Exactly.
I think that, so I think this gets back to a larger conversation about how do we create career paths for people that they can see that reward them in certain ways, whether it's money or, again, patch responsibilities, you get bigger accounts, whatever, without saying, it has to necessarily flow through management.
It's a lot of, you mentioned a lot of drivers that can do it. My guess as to why it's not happening right now has to do with standardizing the comp plan and kind of, hey, well, we did it for that person, so we have to do it over here too. That stuff, especially as you grow as a company, it can get, I'm sure, challenging. And even in the year that I was managing, I tried to do a little bit of that, and that was always the response I got, which was, hey, I love the idea. We don't have a comp plan that can support it, and sorry.
Yeah, well, again, bigger, separate conversation about compensation. Is it time to get rid of commission and sales, get rid of quota, all these things that I think people will start addressing because it's arguably holding us back in many respects. So, John, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Andy. Really a pleasure.
Yeah, well, we'll have to do it again. But so if people wanted to connect with you, LinkedIn, I presume?
LinkedIn, JohnTecce. And you might see something called TC Tuesday flying by on your LinkedIn feed. That is my dad, Michael Tecce, who puts out a weekly video on all things motivation, sales, and leadership. So I had to give him a plug for it because it's become a thing on LinkedIn. I don't know how.
So Michael Tecce.
Yes.
All right, I'm spelling it wrong, that's why. And I know everybody wants to sit here and listen to me Google. It's great radio. Okay, there he is. Okay.
Yes.
Well, good. Well, I'll follow your dad. Tell him he needs to connect. So, all right. Well, John, thank you so much, and we'll look forward to talking again soon.
Andy, thank you.
Okay, friends, that's it for this episode. First of all, I want to thank you for taking the time to listen. I'm so grateful for your support of the show. And I want to thank my guest, John Tecce, for sharing his insights and his experience with us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to this podcast, Sales Enablement with Andy Paul, on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you for your help with that. And thank you so much for investing your time with me today. Until next time, I'm your host, Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone. Hi, friends. I have something really exciting to share with you. We're launching a new podcast called the RevOps Podcast as part of the ringDNA podcast family. Today's leading B2B companies are embracing revenue operations as the answer to misaligned people, processes, and data that lead to recurring sales inefficiencies. However, many people still have critical questions about RevOps. What processes and tools do I need? How do I structure my team? How do I measure outcomes across sales, marketing, and customer success? And what are the best practices for doing that? So join Jordan Henderson, Jonathan Stevens, and Brandon Redlinger, and some of the world's leading revenue operations leaders as they tackle the important questions many of you face today when building a RevOps function. From ringDNA, the company that transforms sales teams into high-performing revenue drivers, comes a podcast guaranteed to go beneath the surface-level conversations and dive deep into the world of RevOps. Your hosts deliver unfiltered, thought-provoking discussions and actionable takeaways on every episode about the ideas, processes, and technology changing the B2B sales landscape. Visit ringdna.com/RevOps to learn more or subscribe now on your favorite podcast player. What if your sales team could know the moment a buyer arrives on your website and talk with them instantly? With Qualified's conversational sales and marketing platform purpose-built for Salesforce, that's all possible. It's not rocket science, it's common sense. Conversations move deals forward. Live chat, voice calls, and meeting bookers accelerate sales conversations without a single email exchange. Capture prospects in that magic moment when they're most interested in learning about your business. Head on over to qualified.com to chat with their team and learn more.